Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to The Decision Hour. I am your host, Adam Bird, and with me I got my buddy John, and we are going to continue this series called Let's Have a Conversation. John, are you there?
I am right here, Adam. How you doing today?
I'm good, my friend. I'm good. So we started talking offline, and we realized, holy crap, we haven't hit the record button yet. We often tend to do that. We have to remind ourselves, hey, we should hit that little red button and get going on this. So this episode today is called Wing It. And I say that because we keep coming up with more and more topics. The more and more we dive into this series of Let's Have a Conversation. And it initially started, John and I have been talking about this for, I don't know, the latter part of about 6 months. Or maybe longer. And it was like, let's just sit down and educate and from our perspective, and let's have a conversation. We want to tweak your minds, so get you and encourage you to, if you come across somebody that you don't agree with on a particular topic or whatnot, respectfully sit down and have a conversation with them. I love sitting down with people from the opposing side of my beliefs because I learned so much from them, and I have a lot more respect. And that's the cool thing about living in this country today, the greatest country in the world, is that you can sit down with people that don't have the same beliefs, and you can still respect each other. So with that being said, I'm bringing on the expert right now, John, and we're
I'm only the expert maybe on one or two things, and actually I claim no expertise. But what I do claim, and I want to bring back our as a great intro, but I do want to kind of bring it back for folks that have listened to the other podcasts we've done in this series of why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And the bottom line is you and I have been talking, and we just thought about the fact that, hey, look, we don't like what's direction our country's going in. We don't like what is going on in our country. How did we get here? And geez, we need to get back to our founding principles because we departed a long way from it.
Right.
And we thought about, well, what can we do to help people to arm themselves and encourage people to be inspired to go out and get involved in some capacity.
Yeah.
So,
and the big thing with that is you got to get involved. It starts there locally at your local level, right? And
100%.
We talked about that last episode, which was solutions. So
local politics is fundamental. Local involvement in your town or your county or your city is fundamental. And it was fundamental to our idea of government as it was initially conceived, and remains so for a very, very long time, until somehow, of course, depending on when you want to say it began, but let's say it started under FDR with the New Deal. Let's just say that is where it began, where the administrative state began to grow. And then over the decades, we've gotten to the situation where we are now, where we have an administrative state that is so large, encompassing about 20 million or so citizens between state and federal, over 50% of the GDP that it is responsible for, and is able to act in its own interest. It's become a thing, a thing with some sort of weird collective will that wants to protect itself. And it's this administrative state which has not been elected. It does not include the separations of power. We talked about agencies, from the IRS to the EPA and others, who have both, they make the rules, legislative, they enforce the rules, executive, and oh, by the way, if you have an issue with any of those policies, they are also the adjudicator. So they have all three branches of government right in those agencies. And that's the administrative state that we're talking about that is beginning to take over. So the idea of local decentralized government is fundamental.
Yeah.
So now we were just talking before we came on about another fundamental idea, and that is the idea of absolute truth. Now, why is this important? Why do I believe the idea of absolute truth is important to our nation? Well, I'll tell you what, let's start with that quote that I read earlier here. It's from Audacity of Hope by Barack Obama. So it's a book he wrote a few years ago, but in it, he says something that's very telling. This is the quote, implicit in the very idea of ordered liberty is a rejection of absolute truth, the infallibility of any idea or any ideology. Stop quote. Now, it kind of seems harmless enough, but think about that again. Implicit in the very idea of ordered liberty is a rejection of absolute truth. Now compare that to our founding document, the Declaration, where we say we hold these truths to be self-evident, where we reference nature and nature's God. So it's an issue. Well, go ahead. You've got a look on your face.
So no, I'm gonna ask. So the quote that you just read from Barack Obama's book, is it contradicting then what what our founding principles of this country were founded on?
Yeah. So and we can take this a little bit further, because I've been reading some stuff this week that was and I watched some lectures and stuff that really helped these ideas to gel. Had a conversation with a good buddy of mine, Charlie Carlberg, who is an extremely just world-class thinker. He's an Episcopal minister down in South Carolina. But yes, the founders are drawing authority from nature's God. They are saying that there are certain truths that they find to be self-evident. In other words, they exist in nature. Nobody has to make them up. Nobody has to grant them. The king doesn't say, yes, this is true, and declare something to be true. It is drawn from nature's God, as they say. Mm-hmm. So they are definitely appealing to the idea of absolute truth in the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Right.
Now, you can look for absolute truth in non-Judeo-Christian philosophies, like Plato as an example.
Well, which Barack Obama was not a practicing non-Judeo-Christian.
Right. And regardless, I mean, we've got a lot of people that claim to be, Catholics.
Yeah, no, and that's completely. I think the fact of the matter, though, is that what he had said contradicts what the founding principles are of this country. And to me, I hear that, and it's like, okay, is he? So it's almost like. It seems like he's almost like hurting or trying to manipulate people to think that it's better to have somebody in control, so you can have the freedoms that you want. Does that make sense?
Okay, it does make sense, and and here's why it makes sense. Here's why it makes sense. That let me explain my understanding. Okay, and here's why absolute truth, in my view, is so important. Absolute truth is the only thing that ultimately acts as a restraint on power. Absolute truth restrains power. In other words, Adam, if you and I are just living our lives, and I say, hey, stealing is wrong. And you say, well, I don't necessarily agree with it. I think stealing's good to go. If finders keepers or something. And then we start to explore why we hold those ideas. And this is why I keep telling folks you need to be able to govern yourself and educate yourself on why you hold your beliefs, so that when you engage other people, you can articulate them in a way that is clear. But if we start to peel back the onion on why you think that stealing is good to go, and I think stealing is wrong, we ultimately run up against some sort of fundamental, absolute standard of truth.
Right.
And I don't mean to get too academic on this. I really don't. And not that I'm really capable of getting that academic. There's lots of people I know who could absolutely crush me in terms of academic knowledge and their ability. But the important concept is that absolute truth is absolutely important. And one of the reasons it is so important, beyond the fact that the founders drew on it as for a concept of natural unalienable rights that are derived from nature's God, divine providence, the judge of the world, and there's one other reference they use for God. But the big deal is that absolute truth is a restraint on power. Morality, if not rooted in some sort of absolute truth, has no authority and is only moral because of some sort of tyranny. So let's say that I said, well, stealing's wrong, and you say, well, I think stealing's good to go, and we have started to have this discussion, and you say, well, why do you think that stealing is wrong? And I tell you, because I said so.
Right.
Now, between you and me, that might not be a big deal, but now let's say that I am in some position of power. Let's say that I'm the president of the United States or a senator or something like that. Now, all of a sudden, I have some sort of power. Now, morality based on power is really just tyranny.
Right.
Morality, but now if I say, well, I believe that stealing is wrong because maybe I referenced the 10 Commandments, and I said, well, God says in as one of his commandments that you're not going to steal. And you say, okay, but I don't believe in the 10 Commandments. And like, well, let's talk about that a little bit further then, and just say we have to have some sort of standard that we can measure ourselves against for morality. We're talking about the Judeo-Christian tradition here that our country is founded on in terms of its laws and the ideas where our ideas come from. They're firmly rooted in that. And so we're always appealing to the idea of God as absolute truth. That's our measuring stick. That's the thing that we look to as our standard. And I might end my argument by saying, well, because we're talking about the Judeo-Christian tradition, God says that stealing is forbidden. And if God values it, then I should value it. If God values it, that would be something that I would put my stake in the ground and say, that is something solid in this world that I can hang on to, is that God values this moral principle of not stealing. And then as a person who is completely imperfect, I would look at God's direction and I would say, well, if God values it, I should probably value it. And this gets back to something that you said when we first started this discussion. You said, if you followed the 10 Commandments to the best of your ability, you would never break any other law. Right? And I thought that was pretty insightful. And it's a great sort of simplified layman way to look at it.
Look at all, you look at all of the laws on the books here in the United States, over 1 million of them, over 1 million. And we're not the only country that has laws. Every country has laws or certain rules or regulations that you have to abide by or whatnot. But if you, and this is for the Christians or people who believe in God, I'm not saying you necessarily have to go to church, but if you believe in God, if you believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins, if you're listening, if you follow the 10 commandments, you will not break any of the laws that man has made throughout history. Now, I want to go back to something you said here just a minute ago, is because you were as we were transitioning into that. You'd said something about people coming in as like, okay, well, I don't believe in your law. I don't believe in your laws. And just recently, as of recently, it happened in. Actually, this happened down in Virginia. 11 men were arrested for armed robbery and stuff, and they said, we don't recognize your laws. We don't recognize your laws. And I want to take it. I guess the point I'm trying to make with this is when in the military, when we get deployed and we go to another country, whether we're at war with that country or not, there are certain rules that we have to abide by being in that country.
Yeah.
There are certain rules that we have to, out of respect for that country. Again, whether we're at war with that country or not, we had to respect certain beliefs because we were in their country.
Yeah.
So why shouldn't that follow for everybody that's here, whether you're in this country or you come to this country or not? Because I certainly don't see that happening. It's supposed to. It's supposed to.
It is supposed to, and I would say that it certainly should. And if it's not, in those cases where it's not, you don't get to pick and choose. And let's take it back to our founding ideas. One of the things that we were founded on was equal protection under the law, equal application of law, rule of law. So, hey, we have a law against stealing here. Well, I don't recognize your law. Too bad, because it is the law of the lands,
right. And
we equally apply that law across the board, regardless, one, of whether or not you recognize the authority, because as an individual, you are sovereign and you have certain rights, but you don't have the right, to steal when we have made through our processes a law against it. And we are founded on the concept of the rule of those laws,
right,
and the equal application of those laws. And so I guess, not only should the government, because God knows it is happening nowadays, at least, but equal application has not always been perfect. It may not even still be anywhere near perfect. It may not even be acceptable, because we particularly see, political rivalry spilling over into the legal system and stuff. Giuliani just got disbarred, for making a case for his client. Stuff like, Trump getting kicked off all of the major
social media
Twitter,
platforms,
social media platforms, and stuff like those are just a couple of examples where the law is not being equally applied. I think a normal citizen that had some of those things happen may have some sort of recourse. But
we're talking a lot about absolute truth, and I think I'm going to change the title of this episode to Absolute Truth. And in doing that, I can't help it. We mentioned social media and Trump getting kicked off. You think of now we have fact checkers.
Yeah,
and you want to talk about what's the opposite of absolute truth is when you get fact checked on social media, because we've never have had those in the past. Well, usually what happens now is you get the little mark that says, "Oh, well, somebody checked this. This is false." That should raise a red flag to you immediately. I got something because I shared something from somebody else, and they said, "You're talking about COVID, so we're putting in these factual information about COVID." I have not shied away from my belief on what COVID is. Do I think it's a virus? Yes. Do I believe it's real? Absolutely. My wife's in the medical field. Do I think that you need it? If you choose not to get it, then you shouldn't be bombarded or harassed about it. And here's the other thing. When a government, here's absolute fact, is that if a government starts paying people to get a vaccination, that should be a red flag as well. Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And we talked a little bit about kind of, I think we were sort of discussing how this podcast, this series came about. And we were having a discussion about, at least in my view, where when we had questions about the 2020 election, about was it properly conducted, it was, in my mind, it was the complete suppression and censorship that took place in the wake of that.
Right.
That convinced me that there must be something there, because otherwise we would be reasonable and say, okay, let's take a look at this and just make sure we're good.
I can't help but to feel like over the years, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, that America is turning into a third world country. And let me be completely frank when I say this. What I mean by that is not so much like what we, like if you've been in the military and you've been deployed, not so much as like a third world country to what we've known or what we've seen or experienced for that matter, but that the mindset is going that direction. And I start to think about things aren't adding up. And instead of just agreeing to go along with it, I want to think critically. And here's the thing. I'm going to let those of you that don't know me, I was not a very good student. I was a high school dropout. I ended up going back. I got I skimmed by to get my diploma. I did a year in college, and then I took like a 10-year break before I went back to college. And the only reason why I went back to college, I didn't learn how to critically think in college. I went back to college because I had to for the job that I had, because I wanted to get promoted. Now, looking back on it, college isn't for everybody. In fact, I'd actually tell people to go more towards trade schools, but that's another conversation. I say all this because I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I'm not the dullest one either. You know what I mean? It's you have to think critically. If you just believe in everything that you see or hear, and you don't listen, they don't want you to ask questions because they're afraid you're going to find out what the truth is.
Yeah, and so that's exactly, and this is honestly, this is at least my objective in doing this entire series. We talked about we wanted to try to equip people and inspire people to educate themselves, to make themselves better, and then to begin to have those conversations in their family, with their neighbors, get involved on a larger scale at town councils, at the county level, at the city level, whatever you may feel called to do. But it begins with yourself and having some knowledge. So here's something I want to touch on real quick, because this has happened a lot. And Glenn Beck, I think, refers to this as the Overton window, where something happens, some event happens that's a crisis, and it opens up an opportunity for tyranny to be injected into the system. And I believe one of the recent episodes in the series, we mentioned that Americans probably lost more freedom than any time in our history with the Patriot Act and the establishment of a surveillance state, which has not gone away. So if you think of September 11th as being an Overton window, as Glenn Beck calls it, I would simply call it a crisis or a problem. Now, we cannot think of a crisis or a problem, and we've had several since then, as justifying the tyranny that comes in the wake of it. Okay, let's take a very recent example of the January 6th incursion into the Capitol. All of a sudden, the greatest threat to our nation, and now this is propaganda, but the greatest threat to our nation is white supremacy and domestic terrorism. Basically, Trump voters, because that's how they label people who might, think differently from them. The bottom line is there was a minor riot in an incursion into the Capitol, which has now been used as an opportunity to institute tyranny. We brought in how many tens of thousands of National Guard troops and put a fence up around it.
Still there, by the way. Still there.
Yeah.
I drove through D.C. the other day.
Did you? I avoid D.C. at all costs now. I don't know that I've been back since I left the Pentagon in 2019. I live in the area, but I don't think I've been back inside of DC since then.
If we go this way, John, it's a lot quicker. No, I'll go around. We'll take the scenic route around.
That's right. No, I go around. We hit the Beltway all the time, but the bottom line is we've got to reinforce that you've got to have this in your mind. We cannot accept a crisis as justification for the tyranny that follows in its wake. Americans have got to be mindful of that.
All right. So I have to say something since you brought it up. And you talked about January 6th incident, and everybody's saying that, there was a protest that stormed the Capitol. Let's get one thing straight, folks. Nobody stormed anything. Mm-hmm. They walked to the Capitol. There's enough video evidence out there that there was a small handful of people. The majority of the people that went to the Capitol, and the D.C. police, they were instructed to let people in.
Yeah, you can
see. Here's an
absolute
absolute truth. I'm gonna give you a spoiler alert that you will not find on any major news network. It was staged. Yeah. Oh yeah, I said it. Probably pissed a lot of people off by saying that. I don't care. It's an absolute truth that what happened on the 6th, there's too many things that if you look at what actually happened, look at the pictures, look at the videos. How many professional photographers were in there taking pictures? Does that happen during a protest? No. Were people shot? Unfortunately, one lady lost her life and stuff like that. Yes, bad things happen. And I think it got to the point where they're trying to blame Trump for this uproaring thing. This was just another way to control the area, which is what the military is doing. The military, everybody thought, President Biden and Harris or whoever, whatever. They're not in control right now down in D.C. The military controls D.C. And it's you listen, you don't believe me? Go down to D.C., walk around the mall, and tell me what you see. And by all means, send me pictures. Prove me wrong. Please.
It is interesting because I personally, like I said, no kidding. We live, we could easily go to DC anytime we wanted to.
Right.
When I'm home, have not been there in a very long time now. But I did not because it's very quiet now. I did not realize that there were still troops in DC.
Yeah. Well, one of a family friend of ours, he's in the Guard up here, and he's been stationed down there. And not once, but twice. He went down there, and he went down on a rotation. Actually had a rotation. Anyway, I say all that because the absolute truth. Here's another absolute truth. Now that you got me on my soapbox, I'm going to stay here for a minute.
Sure.
When you look at how many major news organizations are there, John?
I have no idea. Let's say there's 10.
10. out of those 10, 8 of them, we'll say 8, belong to the same umbrella company.
Yeah.
So when you say, well, I saw it on CBS, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, and CNN, and they're all saying the same thing. The exact same thing. Why do you think that is?
Well, yeah. So
I can tell you it's not professional journalism.
Right. They're one. Many of them are owned by the same organizations with the same ideology. 2, the whole thing is a huge echo chamber. I mean, you can switch from channel to channel to channel, and at the same time, they will be talking about the same thing with the same talking points. Things like
Now, John, wait, hold on. Let me interrupt you there for a minute. How could they do that though?
Because they had the same source.
No shit.
Yeah.
It's this. The reason why you guys believe what you believe, or why most people believe what they believe, those that just watch the news or the news source, you have to dig deeper. There's a saying, follow the money.
Yeah.
This is a prime example. Follow the money. There are more there are more freedom-loving people, God-fearing, freedom-loving people in this country than there are that want the Marxist or socialism idea.
Zero argument. Yeah,
there is far more. The reason why we see, or we are trained to think that there is more Marxism or more socialistic ideals in this country is because of the sources that are pumping out that trash each and every day. Now, John, let me ask you something. You've known me for a while now, and you know that I own Heroes Media Group. And if I was to try to psyop somebody, for an example, and those of you that don't understand that word, it's a psychological operation, right? Mind games. If I wanted to push a certain agenda, then I would create more and more platforms of medias and then push out. It'd be easy for me to push out a narrative. Here's the thing. This is going to be a shocker to many people. Adam is not a millionaire. So I don't have the financial means to do it.
Yeah.
But it starts with guys like myself and John, those of you that are listening. It starts with us. And a lot of people ask, well, what can I really do? 1, you're doing it. 1, you're listening to us. Thank you, by the way. But 2, share this. Share these episodes. Share this series. Let's have a conversation with people. Because the more people that listen to what we're talking about, more and more people will be more apt to sit down and have that conversation with people. And then we can start spreading our positive message, our belief on it. And I'm not saying our beliefs, whether we believe it's right or wrong. I'm not saying one that, that we're right and they're wrong and this, that, and the other. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that I agree with John. There is a problem in this country. John and I have been talking about it now. And what we're trying to do, what we're asking you to do, is don't believe the shit you watch, the shit you read, or even the shit you listen to. Get several sources, put it together, and come up with your own conclusion with it. Ask questions. The most dangerous thing to the government is people who ask questions.
100%. Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote the Gulag archipelago, which is arguably responsible for bringing down the Soviet Union because it exposed the tactics and whatnot that happened there. And one of the things that he says is that it takes one person to not lie to bring down a tyranny. Now, you might end up in a freaking mass grave.
Yeah.
But, the one person who stands up, who refuses to go along with the sham, that's the person who inspires the guy next to him. That's the guy who inspires the lady standing behind him to use their strength of character and to stand up for something bigger than themselves. And that really ultimately is what our objective is with this audience and with this this particular series, is to have you examine your beliefs and then inspire you to have the strength and the cojones to stand up in some capacity to what is going on in our country, which I'll just refer to that as the lie. And there's a lot of lies.
Yeah.
A lot of lies. And this is not a conspiracy theory. It's just watch any press conference.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lying going on.
This is absolute truth that we're telling you.
But yes, we have got to understand that there is such a thing as absolute truth.
Yeah.
We've got to be able to, I've been saying it for years, for many years now, and I'm going to put it a different way. But what I used to say was I'm talking about what I would call normal Americans who believe in things like freedom and liberty and treating people equally, treating people consistent with the content of their character and not the color of their skin. Those sorts of American values, right? I've been saying it for years that we have got to force the so-called progressives, the so-called liberals, and I hate that they get to use those words because, I consider myself to be a liberal. I am a classic liberal because I believe in unalienable rights that are God-given, that I do not have to receive permission from the government for. That is liberalism. What we are actually seeing in the so-called progressive movement that's been happening since, I don't know, whether you want to say it's the 40s, you want to say it's 65 or whatnot, it's actually a regression to authoritarianism. Just look at what's happened most recently as examples of that. But we have got to develop a clear understanding of our own beliefs, a clear understanding of the opposition's beliefs, and we need to force them to say what they are saying. Force them to say what they are really saying. So I'll say that one more time because I know it's a little bit of a tongue twister. Force the opposition to say what they actually mean. And then the only way you can do that is to have a conversation with them. And they say, hey, look, we want to make, and then this is a real life example, and it happens to be based on race, but hell, a lot's based on race now. But okay, as you know, Stacy, my wife, works at the University of Maryland, and she's an education teacher. I believe it doesn't matter. One of the counties that she works with was trying to increase the diversity in their teacher population, which is fine. It's that's a noble goal. To say, we'd really like to get some more perspectives and things in here.
Yeah.
That's fine. But they put out a notice for a job fair. And I don't remember the exact language, but they were only interested, and made it very clear, in talking to people of color. In other words, white people need not apply. So, and what I was like, they are not saying what they're really saying. Because they know that it's wrong, because these are not stupid people. These are not even immoral people. These are people who actually probably have pretty good hearts and are pretty decent people, but they've got this weird thing where they know they've got to do, they've got to try to adjust for race for whatever weird philosophical reason. They understand that it's racist. They ultimately know that. But when they say white people need not apply, They can't use those words. We need to force them
So we're
to use the words.
we're repeating history.
Oh,
Just
you
in a
know, Joe Biden,
just in a different
yeah.
way.
You know, I found it really insulting. And I don't think Joe Biden is necessarily a bad man. I don't necessarily think he's, you know, going straight to hell or something like that. I don't think that. I don't wish any ill will on him personally.
Right.
I hate his positions, and I think he's doing a very, very poor, weak job, and he's devastating our country in ways that we don't even fully understand yet. But you know, that's what happens when I go off and pontificate. I lose my train of thought. Where were we?
We were talking about, you know, the teaching position and whatnot, and how you're explaining that it didn't say that white people need not apply because they would get in trouble to say that, but one could easily interpret that that's what it was saying.
Well, that's exactly what it was saying. Make no mistake. That's exactly what it was saying. And that's just one small example. Oh, and what I was saying was that these are not stupid people. They're not evil people necessarily.
Right.
They probably are trying to do the right thing, but they get caught up, and they're not critically thinking. And what we on the other side need to do, we really do need to do, is to force them into the conversations of, well, why? Continue to ask the questions that walk the idea back to its essence for two reasons. One, to show that the idea is false.
Right.
That's one reason. The second reason is, along the way, and I've done this on many occasions where I was having a friendly debate with somebody, and walked them back to, oh my God, I never realized that. I had never thought about that. Literally what I've had from several folks over the years on large issues.
Yeah.
Where we start to have a conversation,
right.
We walk it back logically, and eventually they get to the point where they realize that, if they're intellectually honest, where they realize that, man, I never thought about it that deeply. And wow, I see now that it's wrong. And we end up changing their opinion. Now, about 90% of the folks who consider themselves to be woke or liberal or progressive or whatever, they're going to cut you off as soon as the subject comes up. They're going to put their hand up, and they're going to say, this conversation is over. And they're going to walk away. They might even stomp off and slam the door. Who knows? But so you hear a lot of people, I hear it a lot, and it annoys me because people say, you know what the problem is today? No, there's not one problem. We have a legion of problems. And one of them is, that we've talked about before, is that people are not having conversations.
Right.
They're getting pissed because some subject that's uncomfortable comes up. They say, talk to the hand. They stomp off, slam the door, and they don't talk to you for like a week. That's the discourse. Now think about where we would have gotten with ratifying the Constitution and drafting the Declaration of Independence if every time we came up against, the abolitionists, somebody like, it doesn't matter, somebody like a Hancock or a John Adams comes up against, one of the delegations from Georgia or South Carolina. And every time the subject of slavery or freedom comes up and they start to talk about and debate that idea of slavery versus freedom, what if they had just put up their hand, stomped off, slammed the door, and gone to the pub to have a pint? We wouldn't have gotten anywhere. We wouldn't have a country. Right. We have got to have those hard conversations.
Let me ask you this, as we're getting ready we'll start winding this down here. Do you think, do you foresee in the future that more and more people will have conversations and that we can get this country turned around?
I hope so. I don't think anybody can predict the future. Here's what I know. Now, I will make this prediction. If we don't start having those conversations, if we don't start polishing ourselves up a little bit and holding ourselves accountable a little bit, holding, having conversations within our families, with our neighbors, getting involved a little bit more in local politics and things where we can have these discussions that implement or that become policy ultimately, a tyranny will march on, and we will lose freedom at the cyclic rate until eventually our country will be no different than any other tyranny throughout history. So I will make that prediction. What do I think people will do? Well, I can tell you this. We have evidence that people are starting to wake up. I keep coming back to the Loudoun County School Board meetings. That is an example of people who are just normal folks, moms and dads, not agreeing with what the school board's doing and going and raising hell. We have got to do it in an articulate way. And that's why I keep coming back to this idea of individual responsibility, individually making yourself better, educating yourself on why it is you believe what you believe. At least read the founding documents. It doesn't take that long. 15 minutes. Read it and try to understand it. At least do that. We have got to develop clear ways of talking about these ideas. Clear ways of having these conversations with other people who may disagree with us. We need to, like I said, understand the Declaration, understand why we believe what I believe, but why we believe what we believe, but study the laws of nature and of nature's God so that we can articulate them, understand the what is happening in the country, at least at the macro level, understand the rise of the administrative state and how it's not consistent with our form of government, understand, what, at least in the broadest sense, what the overarching problem set is. And then, we've got, even if you don't want to run for office or something, get involved with, some sort of party organization or something, because we've got to develop party platforms that are simple and elegant.
Yeah.
Instead of being, being all complex and freaking academic and whatnot. It's not helpful. And both powerful parties anyway are definitely guilty of party platforms that are a little out there. And then ultimately we've got to get back to making laws that are clear, that are equally applied.
Or we need to enforce the laws that we have now.
Well, you know what I would say, honestly?
Or start from scratch.
Yeah, well, and maybe not start from scratch, but we need to weed the garden.
Yeah.
With our legislation, there's a lot of things out there that are not, that are just not helpful, and they're not useful. But we've got to talk to our neighbors and our fellow citizens, because they ultimately, we, the people, are ultimately, we're the only ones that can save our freedom. Nobody is coming to save us. I'll tell you what, Adam, when it was a stark day, and I had been in the military for a while, and had already actually went to Kosovo and was involved in that conflict. But when we rolled into Iraq in 2003, I'm here to tell you, that first month or so, that was a new freaking ball game. And I remember very starkly flying along with my 4 ships or whatever I had at the time, and realizing that I'm it. Me and these other, guys, we're it. Nobody is going to be able to help us or save us. We have to fight. We better be on our game.
Yeah.
The same concept applies for all our freedoms and us as a people and an individual. Now, nobody from outside of America is coming to save us. We are the last bastion. We are standing alone, and we have got to fight. And I'm not even talking about taking up arms. I think that would be disastrous. It may ultimately happen, but I think it would be completely disastrous. And the people who talk about doing that, guarantee you, have never been to war. We don't want that here.
No, we don't. But I think, what was it? It was it the Japanese admiral in
yes. Admiral Yamamoto said we've awoken this.
Yeah. Like anybody would be foolish to attack the mainland of the United States because behind every blade of grass is a rifle. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but that's ultimately that's credit to our Second Amendment.
Sure,
one of my favorite ones, by the way.
we don't want what happened in the Balkans to happen here. We don't want the tribalism that has been going on for ages in Afghanistan to happen here. We don't want it. And if you've been there and you've seen the results, you don't want it in America.
No,
so anyway, I would just say, we need to get engaged at the individual level, get engaged and engage the individual at the local level, and just bring the country back to the philosophy of government that we were founded on.
And we had a good 4-year stretch there for a little while.
Well, we were certainly having inroads, but that was, I think, very demonstrative of the power of the administrative state.
Yeah.
And how all those people and organizations that make up the administrative state, they were able to really frustrate some of Trump's ideas, which I thought were pretty noble. Yeah,
I look at his time in office, and I try to think of a better time that we've had. I mean, the gas prices went down, the economy was booming, we had more jobs are being created, and some people are like, well, that happened from the last administration, it carried over, and blah 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 blah. Did it? Maybe
somebody's always going to say
maybe some of it, but you're not being honest with yourself if that's what you truly think, because we've had decades of stretches there where we could have gotten better and it didn't, and then all of a sudden the evil orange man takes over, and I'm saying that because that's what he was called on social media, and he gets. Let me back up. I'll say it like this: everybody liked Donald Trump before he ran for office. Everybody liked Donald Trump. He gave more. He gave more money to other college. Like there are certain black colleges that Obama took money away from that Trump used to donate to and so forth.
Yeah.
Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, they have all shaken hands and thanked Donald Trump prior to him running for office. And don't take my word for it. You'll find this stuff right on the internet. Don't take my word. It's absolute truth. But then he runs for office and wants to take his beliefs and stuff, and he is a God-fearing man.
He's a racist, right?
Yeah, and then all of a sudden he's a racist? Come on.
And a fascist.
Come on. He might be a little rough around the edges. Do I admit that he sometimes says stuff that he probably... Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
I did not start off as a Trump fan. I thought he was a jackass.
See, and it wasn't until I read his biography, and it was just like, oh, it's Donald Trump. He's everybody knows it, the big realtor in New York, blah blah blah. But he's done so much for so many people, and sure, he's had his run-ins here and there and whatnot. Just like, but he never stayed in the news for that long until he did something good. Or bad for that matter. And then as soon as he ran for office, everybody that was taking money from him as a civilian,
Yeah.
all of a sudden they don't like him. They're this, they're that. They turn their backs on him. And here's the other thing. If you're that type of person, I think that's cowardless, in my opinion, to do something like that. I can understand that you change your mind, or maybe somebody does something that changes your opinion of that particular individual.
Yeah.
But, and again, I state, I wasn't necessarily a Trump. I respected him as a businessman, being a businessman myself. And I thought sometimes that he would definitely add fuel to the fire when it was unnecessary on
Yes.
social media, to the point
Why are
where
you throwing gas on that fire?
it brought a new type of entertainment to the to the world, man.
Yeah.
But I say all that because, and again, don't take my word for anything that I've just said. You can find all of that stuff on the internet. You hear it from the news, like he's a racist, he's this, he's that. Go do your research. It wasn't until that I found out that the Obama administration took money from black colleges and several other black organizations. And then when Trump got into office, he turned around and gave money back to those colleges. Now, mind you, you have to be black to go to these colleges. And I look at it as just another way of segregating people. But at the same time, it doesn't affect me really. So it's kind of like, whatever. But I'm glad that he brought money to the inner cities. He's doing more things. Those are the things that the Obama administration, that the media would have you believe that he did stuff for. He didn't. And now you have more people, especially black people in high positions, that are coming out and saying, listen, we've been voting Democrat all of these years and nothing has changed. And then this guy takes over, Trump takes over, and now all of a sudden we're getting the things that we've been asking for the last 40 years. Again, don't take my word for it. This is all stuff that you can find on the internet.
Sure.
And you can find it on, like, don't just take one. Oh, I read it here, so it must be true. No. Research and read several articles. And then go out and try to find several articles that contradict what you just read. I guarantee you'll find the absolute truth by putting that together. And that is the truth. And that's why they're trying to hinder all of that now. Anyway.
Yeah, it's a word game, and I think it's a good point. And I would encourage people to listen to Thomas Sowell. Is that his name? Sowell, I believe. Particularly on the concept of the administrative state and how it has badly affected the black community. Look up the statistics for how many broken homes there were in the black community in the 40s and 50s, and compare that to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. I think you'll find some shocking, I know, because I've seen them, you will find a shocking correlation between the rise of so-called government, help programs for the black community and the breakdown of the traditional family inside of the black community. And there's, I'm sure, other reasons, not just the presence of the administrative state. It didn't help. And a lot of it was politically motivated, particularly the 1965 LBJ Great Society. Yeah, War on Poverty, that whole thing that LBJ did, particularly those programs were highly politically motivated. LBJ wanted black voters to vote Democrat, and he came up with a scheme to try to buy their votes. And it has been not a good deal for the black community. But that's just that is my assessment. But I would encourage folks to listen to Thomas Sowell, who is a black man, a sociologist, I believe is his profession, deep thinker, and he had a lot to say on that particular question.
All right, folks. Well, listen, we're going to wrap this up right now. This episode, I changed it in the middle of the episode. We're going to call this one Absolute Truth. This part of our Let's Have a Conversation series with my buddy John. If you don't know who John is, actually a business owner. I'm gonna switch this up as we're closing this out. John's a business owner. John, tell the listeners about your business and where they can find you.
Yeah, Semper Savage is a marinade and dressing company that my wife Stacy and I founded a few years ago, and we make all natural marinades and dressings
So good.
that are the finest on the planet.
Yes.
And they use simple natural ingredients. They are savagely flavorful. We've got 4 flavors right now. We've got Savage Caesar, Savage Cider, apple cider vinaigrette, Savage Balsamic, which is a balsamic vinaigrette, and Savage Centurion, which is a red wine vinaigrette. All delicious, all excellent as salad dressings, as marinades for veggies and meat, drizzle sauces, dipping sauces. The uses are darn near infinite, we're finding from our customers. But check us out at sempersavage.com. Go there and order yourself a 4-pack or a 2-pack. And that's your best value. And get you some.
I love it. We have a bunch of it in our house, and we use it at least 3 nights a week in this house. Easily, hands down, the best stuff. We won't even buy anything else from the store anymore.
You'll never go back.
No, certainly not. So thank you for that, John.
Absolutely.
Folks, that is all the time that we have. And so make sure you check out Semper Savage. Also, go give a listen and a shout out to our parent company, Heroes Media Group. You can check out the website, heroesmediagroup.com. Until next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.